James O'Keefe. So in essence, really, you have a two-pronged effort to try to straighten out the media and journalism in America. One is your undercover investigations. And now it turns out, even though you don't like it, it's the lawsuits, which actually put people under oath, and therefore they have to give you the information. If they refuse to, they go to jail for contempt. So you really have opened a whole new offensive against these corrupt media people.
Yeah, you articulate our mission perfectly. That's exactly right. You go to jail for contempt, but I don't know. I don't know of any other plaintiff in modern history that is willing to release videotape depositions during a libel. I'm not aware of that. I know that Gawker has been sued, but not the New York Times. So I believe we're going to be successful, and we're going to call it the People's Defamation Defense Fund, Rudy. That's the goal here, is to expose the media for their lies and their malice. You can't lie with malice in this country.
Well, let's get to the CNN project, because I think this is so fascinating. We're going to play some examples of Chester explaining to us what CNN does. But first, tell us, who was Charlie Chester? He wasn't just like just some assistant running around the studio. He's a person with a lot of discretion, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's the director, the technical director. So if you don't know what that is in television, it's the guy in the control room that has access to everything, all the shows, the culture. He knows more about the newsroom than the hosts do. He's kind of in the nerve center of CNN. So this is not a shrinking violet. This is not just anybody at CNN. And he was very, very explicit in the first tape in particular about how CNN, he came to CNN to get Trump out of office. And if it wasn't for CNN, Trump would be the president still. And he talks about how they're trying to paint Biden as this is kind of strange, but he says, young geriatric with aviator sunglasses. I mean, it really is someone out of central casting if you were to make a South Park episode of what a CNN person would be doing. And I think the worst part of the tape, in my opinion, was when Charlie Chester said, this is what we're doing, but we're not telling people that we're doing this. So I think the biggest veniality here is that Chester is deceiving the public, or the network is, because I don't have a problem with CNN saying publicly, okay, we're an arm of the Biden administration. We're very pro-Biden. Just be honest about it. But the fact that they couch themselves as the most trusted name in news, that's the problem I have with the behavior.
Well, we're going to play the part about at the very, very beginning, where he points out and brags about the fact that he and CNN got Trump out. And then we'll play the part about how they exaggerated situations where Trump's hand was shaking and made it look like he was completely incapable and incapacitated. So we'll play that right now.
To believe it, that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out. Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? So our next thing is going to be for climate change awareness.
Do you think it's going to be just like a lot of fear, climate?
Yeah, fear sells. Fear sells. No one ever says those things out loud, but it's obvious.
And what is it you do?
Technical director, it's one step down from director. It's going to be our focus. Our focus was to get Trump out of office. Without saying it, that's what it was. Trump his hand was shaking or whatever, that he was losing it, he's unfit. We were creating a story there. So that's I think that's propaganda.
Now, how did you arrange this situation with him? This was sort of an undercover, which I'm very familiar with, an undercover operation, and you had a young woman really go on dates with him, correct?
Well, I'm not going to get into exactly the details of that, although I will tell you that we don't cross any sort of ethical lines. We don't, for example, we would never touch or become sexual with any subject. However, we had a few meetings with this individual in New Jersey. He works in that New York metropolitan area, so Jersey City, and we did have a female undercover reporter spend a few meetings with him. He really opened up to her.
So that's who he's talking to. When we hear him talking, he's talking to her. And again, let's just let the audience know that that's a state that allows one-party consent.
That is correct. So you can't do this in, say, Maryland or
And
Pennsylvania.
I'm sure, I know you're very aware of that.
We are. We have many lawyers that work with us.
So this is a perfectly lawful conversation.
Yeah, and he was speaking. It's interesting you bring that up. I just want to say one thing about the ethics of this is that one party consent, we believe, is usually appropriate. He's speaking with a member of the public, a stranger he's just met, who's not part of CNN, and therefore he doesn't have the expectation of privacy. He's in a public place, and he really was very proud of this, of what they're doing in some way.
You can tell that right from the very beginning, from that initial tape where he's sort of bragging about how they got Trump out. But then he goes on to point out something that I think we've all suspected, if not known, which is that CNN really exaggerated COVID to the point of making it obsessive and making it, for many people, an obsessive fear by constantly showing the numbers. And then when they wouldn't do it, Zucker would call and tell them to put the numbers back up.
That's right. He said there was a bat phone, a red phone that would ring, put the COVID numbers back up. And this is where Charlie Chester actually expresses a bit of hesitation and says he does feel bad about what they're doing. I think in that case, it was so gross that they would want more people to die, it seems, in order to get the numbers higher, because, to Charlie's words, fear sells, and if it bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads. It's a statement so honest that the undercover reporter actually repeated it and said, really? If it bleeds, it leads? And Charlie says, well, now climate change is going to be the new obsession of CNN to replace COVID, because they need something else to foment fear and outrage.
Well, James, when he talks about fear, and fear sells and fear gets ratings, fear also creates depression, anxiety. Fear can be extremely dangerous to play on that with people that are just a little bit weak, and a lot of people are. So we know that during the lockdown that we had, which to me seemed like it got to the point where it's unconstitutional, where people were locked in, we know there were excessive amounts of depression, suicides, people who were irrationally frightened. So CNN clearly was helping to create that. I mean, it's one thing to be afraid of the reality of COVID. It's another thing to make COVID much worse than it is and play on the minds of people that can be easily drawn into depression and suicidal thoughts. I mean, doesn't he realize that this did tremendous damage to real human beings?
Well, I think that's a good point, and that's the issue at hand. I think he clearly says in the tape that it's about ratings, and we've heard this before from other CNN employees we've undercover filmed. It's about ratings, and they've sacrificed what's moral and true and just. And this has got no bearing to news that I'm aware. Journalism is about getting to the bottom of things and determining the truth. And there's this sort of such artifice to this network, because anytime you actually talk to them about what they really believe, it's so different than how they project themselves to the public. But I think that, again, the biggest problem we have is that Twitter and Google and the big tech companies prefer the content from CNN over someone like me. And you know what else? In the complaint we filed in New York court, defamation, which was filed yesterday afternoon, by the way, we just filed this defamation lawsuit. Twitter left up a tweet by CNN's Drew Griffith where he confronted a woman on her front lawn, a private citizen in Florida, and did not blur the number on her house. But Twitter took down Project Veritas's account a month ago because we confronted a Facebook executive in the street outside of his house. So it's a complete double standard. And I hope the judges and the courts see it for what it is, because we're a nation of laws in this country, and there shouldn't be separate treatment and preferential treatment. There should be equal justice under the law, and you can't lie about me publicly and with malice. So I hope that I look forward to the depositions of Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, and the decisions that were made about taking our account down.
Gee, I'm looking forward to seeing the deposition of Jeff Zucker. I think we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Your credit card company found Well, thank you for coming back, and we're going to continue with our very, very interesting interview with James O'Keefe. James, he also, Chester, during the, what were there three or four situations with him? I think in terms of tapes, you have 3 or 4.
There were 3 different tapes that we released. The third one was released on Thursday, and Twitter banned our account just an hour or so after we released them, saying, quote, "We want to help Black Lives Matter and not report on crimes against Asian Americans." And he made a bunch of racial statements, and that was the one that I guess was the straw that broke the camel's back at Twitter.
I'm surprised they didn't do it on the first 2. But I mean, the second one, he basically says that reporters on CNN basically tell people what to say, and they only put on people that will follow the script.
Any reporter on CNN,
okay.
what they're actually doing is they're telling the person what to say. It's always like leading them in a direction before they even open their mouth. And the only people that we will let on the air, for the most part, are people that have a proven track record of taking the bait.
If you watch CNN, this is obviously true. He is just telling us what any intelligent observer of CNN would see, but it's very interesting to see him admit it.
Yeah, he said he did say that. He said that they put words in people's mouths, and if the person doesn't parrot what they tell them to say, then they don't put them on the show. And I did find that to be one of the more extraordinary admissions. That means that there's a kind of symbiotic relationship between the guest at CNN and the powers that be, what they want you to know, and they don't bring on sources which are not prima facie credible in their own mind. That means they don't bring on sources that are not people that don't regurgitate the talking points that they want. And again, that has no relation to journalism that I'm aware of. The quote that Chester used was "take the bait," quote, "take the bait." So, I mean, this is just, I think, Rudy, it was so true and devastatingly, transparent that they had no other option but to cut my tongue out and not allow me to report what they didn't allow me to report what the guy was saying. I'm not saying what I'm saying. I'm not opining about CNN. I'm quoting CNN. So what Project Veritas is fighting for are principles so fundamental in this country, meaning I'm fighting for my right to quote people and relay what they've told me. So we can't afford to lose this lawsuit, Rudy. We can't afford to lose at all, because what we stand for and what we do is so fundamental to the First Amendment here. And that's why I don't think we will lose.
I do hope you win the lawsuit, and you should. But, I've long ago not counted on courts to always do justice. You've already accomplished a great deal with what you've exposed here. I mean, these words are coming from him, not from you or me or someone else. He's the one that's saying, like in this second one, that Zucker would call and tell them to increase the fear.
Like this special red phone ringer. Yeah. And they pick it up, and it's like the head of the network being like, there's nothing that you're doing right now that makes me want to stick. Put the numbers back up, because that's the most enticing thing that we have. So put it back up. So like things like that are constantly talked about.
I mean, just think about that. Geez, there's not enough fear of the pandemic going on in America. We got people locked up. We got people in depression. We got people committing suicide. Yeah, let's ratchet it up more. Let's see if we can kill more people. I mean, this is really a network that has no regard for the American people. I was on there I was one of the few Republicans, conservatives to go on CNN, because I'm sort of a romantic. I always believe you can try to convince the other side. And it really would descend into vicious battles with them, in which I would point out that they were a corrupt, lying network. And then it would be, 30 minutes of screaming. And then I realized all I was doing was helping their ratings, because the only thing anybody would watch on CNN. I'd go on there and do battle with Chris Cuomo for 45 minutes. And they never would allow you to get 1 minute into your answer if it contradicted what they wanted you to answer. They would then interrupt, and it was frustrating but very revealing. And it's very interesting to me and kind of justifies a lot of what I did to see that that's exactly what they were trying to do. They're trying to put words in your mouth. I would feel that as I was going through the interview.
I mean, Veritas is what we do is we confirm suspicions. At the time, this is not shocking to the conscience, but it certainly confirms what we've always known.
And then the ultimate one, the third one that you released, is the one in which he discusses Black Lives Matter, and that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Apparently, the tape or the interview that you had with him regarding Black Lives Matter is very, very important to the safety of America. I mean, the fact is that the left, CNN, the left, the whole cabal, were trying to create the narrative that Asian Americans were being attacked by white supremacists. And it blew up in their face when the statistics were revealed that whites of any kind only account for about 23% of the attacks on Asian Americans. All the rest are done by non-whites. And the single group that does the most are unfortunately, African Americans. And here, CNN, of course, is trying to deceive, to try to create a false impression. I was trying to do some research on the Asian hate, like the people who are getting attacked and whatnot. A bunch of black men have been attacking Asians. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we, CNN, are trying to help BLM, he said.
I was trying to do some research on like the Asian hate, like the people are getting attacked or whatever. A bunch of black men that have been attacking Asians. So I'm like, what are you doing? Like, we're trying to like help like with the BLM and like we're gonna like.
So they got caught with the truth. The truth. They went and found the truth, and then they had to cover it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just sort of speaks for itself there. What he said, and helping Black Lives Matter is not news reporting. It's or not covering certain crimes against certain, Asian American people because they're Asian. And this is just, I mean, it's just gross. I don't know how else to say it. I can't believe. I was at a loss for words when Twitter took that down, and frankly just left the other people's accounts up, like Drew Griffin at CNN. His account still remains for doing the same thing that we did, and it's such a double standard, and it's very unjust. And I think a lot of people are waking up now. I hope more people continue to. I've had people who don't even agree with like you politically, for example, but look at these tapes, like moderate people or even slightly left of center people saying this is just disgusting. I don't, so we got to wake people up, and I think we will. And Veritas tips at protonmail.com. Our tip line again is Veritas tips at protonmail.com is where you can go to work with us.
Say that a little slower.
It's Veritas tips. That's spelled Veritas tips at protonmail.com. It's an encrypted email server. And a lot of our whistleblowers and insiders send us information, and that's how we pursue these leads and do these undercover operations.
So he concludes with, I think, an excellent conclusion by Mr. Chester, which is you can shape an entire people's perception about anything depending on how you do it, which is what they are attempting to do with the American people and have had some success.
They've had a lot of success. I would say that their power, we don't seek their validation or their approval, but we do recognize that these networks have tremendous power. One could argue that CNN in an oligarchy or a cartel alongside of Twitter and Google and the New York Times and the Washington Post have more power than all three branches of government. And that is a fact. That's something that used to have been said by Alexander Solzhenitsyn in the 70s, and it certainly applies today with the collusion between the tech companies and CNN. This goes back to what Abraham Lincoln said, that public perception is everything, and without it, you can't craft public policy. So we need to fight a media war in this country, a culture war. We need to expose the media for what it is and get more people on tape admitting these things. Who knows what will happen in the depositions, Rudy? We might uncover all manner of things. We might uncover, who knows, they're destroying their emails, which you can't do after you're sued. So we don't know the fraud and the graft and the duplicity that will come out in the discovery process. But to me, the only way to hold them accountable is under the country's libel laws, because they have no shame. They don't care. Nobody will hold them responsible. Nobody in the media does. So I don't know what else to do except to continue to blow the whistle on hidden camera.
You're doing it, and you're doing it very, very effectively. You have been doing it for some time, and now I think you're exposing one of the two main areas in which they're trying to destroy our country and destroy our way of life. One is to subvert our educational system and try to convince our young people to hate America, which they've gone pretty far with. And the second is to subvert our media and make it like Pravda was in the Soviet Union and get people to hate America even more. So I really commend you, James, for what you're doing. And James, good luck. We'll be in touch. And any help you need, you can count on me.
Thank you, Rudy.
God bless you.